Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, we get the podcast on the rails with our special guest, Dan Bresolin, Vice President, Intermodal, CN. With 20 years of experience in international and domestic supply chain, and with the movement of goods around the world and through our vast nation a top priority for retailers coast to coast, never a better time to be delving into the insights, details, and product movement trends that retailers need to know today.
I think pre-COVID, I would say that most of the big cargo owners, retailers, I think we're really running a true just-in-time supply chain. And if there's anything that has changed, it's now more where they want to have a little more landside flexibility and be able to make sure that their large SKUs are more easily the large SKUs that they sell in their stores are more easily nearby, ready to fulfill the stores.
Let's listen in now. Dan, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Michael. I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah, listen, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of your work, big fan of CN, and I love trains. I got to tell you, just like from being a little kid, but I also love them as being part of retail. The infrastructure and the movement of goods. It's such a rich part of the Canadian history, but it's so relevant today. So it's a nice juxtaposition of the uniting of the nation, but also the services you provide to retail and your understanding of supply chain. Which, Dan, did you ever imagine this number of people in the country would be knowing what the word supply chain means?
Well, I mean, to your first point, it's kind of been exciting in the last couple of years with CN. We're 100 years old now, actually 101, I think, this year. So, your mention of the history and the legacy of the railroad is something that's quite exciting for us. And I cannot fathom 2 years ago knowing what we would be going through now in the supply chain. And you're right. I think every business owner has got a supply chain now, at the forefront of their mind. And I think that the average person at home is learning about supply chain because they're waiting for those sorely needed vaccines.
Well, and it's more than vaccines, right? I mean, it's vaccines, but it's also bike parts. It's everything, right? Like it's such, this time last year at the beginning of the COVID crisis, Canadians had a bit of a sense of food insecurity because they saw some empty shelves and, it took a little bit of time for the supply chain to react. But generally it's probably the first time in my lifetime that you just can't go out and buy what you want. There's many, many instances of back orders and there's complexities and in all the, from manufacturing to all that stuff, which is why I'm really excited to talk to you about it because you've got that front seat, so to speak, view of everything that's going on. But anyway, I've jumped right in. Let's take a step back and tell me about yourself, your professional journey and your role at CN.
Right on. I started my transportation career in the trucking industry, working for the TNT Group, which became the TST Group, which is now part of TFI. Worked there for about 5 years, and then I joined the railroad in 1999. And I've held about 6 positions in intermodal. So I've spent most of my career in the intermodal side of CN. And right from an entry-level account manager in 1999, and I've kind of went into the international side of the business in 2009. So I've kind of got a good base on the domestic side. And for the last 9-10 years, I worked in the international side, and now I have got both domestic and international intermodal under me.
It's a great run, right? I mean, it's a great, a great background. Now, for those listeners who may not know exactly, they may be familiar with the term intermodal, but they may not know exactly what it means. Give us a quick brief on what intermodal is.
Yeah, it's a container that's interchangeable onto a chassis for a truck, for final delivery, first mile, last mile. It can go on a vessel and it can go on a train. Yeah. So the container can move anywhere you want it.
You move the containers, but on any given day, how many containers are moving around in your network?
I'll just give an example. We have 3 trains a day just at the Port of Prince Rupert alone that come out of the port with over 1,000 containers on it. So you layer that on with the Port of Vancouver, Port of Halifax, Port of Montreal, and New Orleans in the Gulf, and that's just the international segment. The domestic segment also has a robust train package with multiple trains that are arriving and leaving Toronto every day, going in all directions. So it's literally thousands of containers every day.
So I've tried to count while I'm waiting for a train to pass by, how many containers on average, are on a train? It's less than 1,000? Is there an average? I guess it's capacity, but what's the max capacity, I guess?
So, I would say that trains average around, 10,000 feet in length. And if you've got a 10,000 foot train of intermodal containers, you're looking at around anywhere between 350, give or take 350 containers on that train.
Well, let's talk about supply chain logistics as we headed into the COVID year. So let me take you back to this time last year, minus a couple of months. So pre-COVID, the before time. Your job is to move a massive amount of goods that arrive on our shores or maybe even manufactured on our shores. So what were the best in class strategies for doing that? What were the trends you saw in supply chain? And we'll talk about them. Where I'm going with this is what have you done as an organization to react to the COVID crisis and its characteristics, and then how the COVID crisis might impact or frame what you do moving forward. But let's start in the before time, because many of the things that happen during COVID are an acceleration of already existing trends. So what were those big trends when you talk to executives in supply chain? What were you talking about?
Well, first of all, I think pre-COVID we had a really good start to 2020 in January and in the months leading up. We were really pushing our domestic core business with our trains. We were seeing a lot of e-commerce was growing at the time, so it was something that we had our eyeball on. That's since been accelerated immensely here through COVID, and I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later. The supply chain was really operating the same way it had already done. The ports were busy. The imports were coming in. We still continue to move a lot of U.S. destined cargo through the ports. We were watching real closely and trying to get deeper into the end customer and the BCOs, or beneficial cargo owners, out there to try and understand a little bit more about their import and export strategies. And at the time, we were really trying to bring the international and the domestic supply chains together, because at the end of the day, they do interchange, and we were very much we wanted to break down the silos between those two businesses. So going into a pre-COVID, it was full steam ahead, business as usual. We were starting the year off in January with a pretty robust kickoff in volume at the beginning of the year.
And then COVID started. I remember speaking to retailers in late January, February of last year, and mostly the concern was around supply chain. Would there be impacts coming out of China, particularly? I described it as casting a shadow on retail. I had no idea it would be a full eclipse of the sun. But now COVID is we're a year into the COVID crisis, and talk about. I've been reading a lot about and hearing a lot from retailers around the complexities and challenges in the supply chain. I alluded to it at the beginning of the conversation. I hear congestion at ports. I hear a shortage of containers. I hear containers in the wrong places. As you step back, what's your global perspective to give the listeners an idea of exactly what's going on out there with the movement of goods globally? Yeah,
no, we were watching what was happening in December and January, in China with COVID, and the whole concern was well, is that going to come here? And but at the same time, we were also asking ourselves, well, what is it going to do over there? Because we could be looking to consume a lot of goods. But if the factories aren't open and they're closed down, then that's going to be an issue. So what we saw was a dramatic decrease on the import side as COVID, as China shut down and many of the nations shut down over there. And with this massive decline in import volume, we were forced into into a situation where we had to make sure we were managing our cost and managing how we were running our own supply chain internally to make sure that we had the right trains on the network to handle the volume that was there. That was a very trying time. And then as China became more, or we're getting well, that's when we were getting sick. I mean, that's when everything really changed when that happened. So as the volumes went down, what we saw was all of the grocery, pharma, all of those goods took off. We kind of, as we were dipping down on our international volumes, our domestic volumes took off. And not only that, the demand for temperature protected equipment, refrigerated containers, heated containers, anything that would be able to move pharma and grocery goods into these stores was in high demand, and so we kind of got really lucky that the international business dropped to the point where our terminals could stay extremely fluid and extremely responsive to the market, so that we could be fast and get the goods out as soon as possible.
Well, and it's not like you don't. That's not part. It's not like that's not part of your DNA anyway, to be fast and nimble. But this kind of, I'm sure, as I've often said, the supply chain is harder sometimes to start than it is to stop, which we, merchants experienced in the beginning of the year. Now, fast forward a year, December, January, February, and we've got kind of the opposite problem. I hear is that you've got this choke point where this massive demand of very big physical goods is coming in, and the container issue. What do you know about what do you think about the container shortage and traffic at the ports? What's your experience?
Well, let's just talk about, what happened. So we get into June, July, August of last year, and the ocean container carriers were still forecasting blank sailings based on volumes, and then within 15 to 30 day switch in July was hit, and the volumes just took off. And I think this is just a function of the fact that, people were starved for goods. I think people were at home, looking to shop. That's when we watched the e-commerce. A lot of the, it happened in my house where packages were showing up every day to the door. I know that my family was not going to the mall as much, but, we watched all this take off, this huge boost in volume take off. And at the same time, we're watching it happen at all the ports across the U.S. And in the East Coast of the U.S. and Canada. And as you know, the Canadian gateways are a very, very good gateway to go to the U.S. Midwest. So we're watching volumes go up there as well. So, I mean, it was really a dramatic shift. Being down 20% to volumes going up over 20%, and it all happened when within about a month and a half of start to finish. So you go from taking resources down to having to not only bring resources back, but having to hire in some cases in some of our terminals in Toronto where we've got new hires going in. And that was really difficult too, because, when you hire people during COVID, usually you can have a class of, 10 or 20 people doing training. Well, it's a lot harder to hire and get people back when you have to have a classroom with only 2 or 3 people in it that are socially distanced and they can learn. So, I mean, it was quite a challenge getting back to where we were. I mean, we're really in a good place now. We've hired, we've ramped up the resources. Our trains are getting really fluid on the network. We're getting our velocity up, and things are very good right now, which is really important because even though we've got some hope on the vaccines, we also have a bit of a third wave going on here right now. So we've got to make sure that we keep our terminals fluid and ready to go if there's an urgent need.
I was speaking with Dave Poirier, and he's an expert in supply chain logistics, and he described a history where the supply chain in general were so locked down and so optimized by retailers that it almost got too rigid, and that the challenge was responding to these kind of shocks. Would you agree that moving forward, even now, that the bias now is towards agility versus lockdown. Like you if you can't predict the future, you better be able to respond better to it. Is that your perspective as CN, and is that what you're hearing from your clients?
Yeah, I think that I think pre-COVID, I would say that most of the big cargo owners, retailers, I think were really running a true just-in-time supply chain. And if there's anything that has changed, it's now more where they want to have a little more landside flexibility and be able to make sure that their large SKUs are more easily the large SKUs that they sell in their stores are more easily nearby, ready to fulfill the stores. I mean, what we've really seen, I think, is a lot of concerned retailers with what is happening because of the pandemic. Why they're ordering products much earlier because they never want to be in a position where 3 months from now, if there's a variant wave or something going on in Asia, that they can't get their goods. So they want to make sure their goods are secured here in a warehouse, ready to go so that they can put them in the stores quickly. I really feel that that's really driving what's happening right now. And as you know, concurrently, or what's happening at the same time, is we've got ocean carrier capacity, which is tight, to say the least. And we've watched.
I hear the spot rate. I index the spot rate, which is my amateur's way of kind of figuring out how busy the lanes are just at record amounts, right? Like,
yeah, if you really look at the situation where most of the contracts get signed in February, March, April of 2020, they're ending now. They were signed as we were heading into a pandemic. So people that signed contracts probably had a really good rate. But the spot rate changed quickly in order to fill out the ships, and was raised dramatically to a point where we're seeing some incredible rates on the ocean. You would be ordering on your contract, but if you needed more space, you would have to order on the spot market. And I'm sure you were concerned, geez, if I don't order now, I might pay a higher rate later. So there was a lot of almost panic type buying. Maybe that's not the right word, but I mean, people were really trying to get things ordered quickly and get them in case there was another wave, or even another wave here in North America. What happens if a port were to have an issue with an outbreak or anything like that? So, I mean,
it can happen. It can happen, right? I mean, let's bring that to your front door, so to speak, or on your tracks. What does all this mean for you? Does it mean more marshaling, more storage? Does it change the way you move the goods? I mean, I suspect you're getting the goods out of these ports as fast as you can. What has changed because we've been talking about ocean liners and things, but what has changed from your perspective?
Well, what we've seen is a couple things. First of all, there generally is a lot more freight desiring to come through the gateway than what the gateway can traditionally handle. We know the capacity of the gateway, how many trains can be processed a day, how much work can be done, and really there's ships that are still waiting to discharge. There's a lot more cargo than what the gateway can traditionally handle. I'll preface that with, in February, we generally have cold in Canada. It usually gets down to minus 25 or 30 or even 40 in some places across the West. So, that really puts a strain on the rail network because we're not able to run the same velocity and the same speed across the network as we normally can. So it's traditionally a time where our car supply is a little bit tighter to the ports. We're getting a lot better now as the network is warming up. But in general, there is a lot of cargo that still wants to be discharged at the ports and transited into Canada or into the U.S. Midwest. And if everybody's reads the periodicals that are out there, and we all know that the LA Long Beach is the biggest terminal on the U.S. West Coast, and they've got anywhere between 30 and 40 vessels that are at anchor right now, waiting to discharge. So, I mean, all of the supply chains, in my opinion, from what I'm reading and seeing, is every supply chain is taxed right now with a lot of volume trying to transit through the gateways.
Let's get back to talking about retail and supply chain. So, kind of second last question. But as you sit with retailers, and let's turn that around a little bit, what would your advice be to retailers when they have the conversation around moving goods with CN? What should they be thinking about for the future? Let's talk about the future, and how should they be framing that up in their minds and that configuration of their supply chains?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's imperative that we as CN and the true shippers, develop a better understanding of what the requirements are and the needs are for the business. In the past, the traditional relationships are, on the international side, we deal with the ocean carrier. And I think it's important that we develop a deeper understanding of who's in the box from an international perspective. And we develop relationships, whether it be with the forwarder or with the cargo owner. Everybody, we talk to the big shippers, but we really need to talk to the smaller shippers and understand their requirements from a perspective and build products around their needs. And so, from that standpoint, I think we're doing a great job there. We will only continue. I think when it comes to e-com, the large retailers, speed is very, very important. CN is blessed with amazing geography that we have across our network. We got Prince Rupert and Vancouver, which are a day to 2 days closer to Asian markets, so that we have the ability to be fast off the ship. Even Halifax, whether you're coming through the Suez or a North Europe trade, it's still, you've got to go right by Halifax before you get to New York. So we've got great geography there that we can build our product around speed to market and work with the train package in order to drive a consistent, reliable train that can be fast into the Midwest or into Toronto or Montreal for that matter. So it's building products that the customers need. We've got to build better relationships with our cargo owners. And then on the domestic side, it's finding that right mix of 53-foot business on the domestic side, working with different products like transloading on the West Coast, whether it be in Vancouver, which we do a lot of today, Prince Rupert, which is developing their import and export logistics parks right now, or in Calgary at our logistics park, LPC Calgary, where we can marry up shippers with an international to domestic supply chain in order to speed their products to market. So, it's e-com is the future. We're not a direct player. We're a supporter. We're a supply chain partner with many supply chain players, whether it's the ocean carrier or the port operator. But we've got to be there and make sure that we've got the digital tools, which I think is the last piece here, is the digital tools that can work with many different supply chains and give that information, that transparency and information to the shippers.
Well, it's been a great discussion. We've kind of gone from the beginning to right to present day, so it's been a really nice, fulsome discussion. So I thank you for that. And where can the listeners go if they want to learn more about CN, about your work, or get in touch with you?
I think our best resources on the internet right now, www.cn.ca. It's very clean, clear, easy, laid out. You can serve. You can go through different markets that we serve and how we serve them. And there's great contact information available on the websites, on our website. And anything else, I reach out to the account managers that we have, and they're all listed on the website as well.
Well, that's perfect. Well, listen, been great conversation. Thanks for joining me. It's been. I wish you continued success and continued moving of the goods. Thank you from me for you moving the goods. You're behind the scenes, but critical to getting products and food on the shelf and feeding the nation. So thank you and all the hardworking men and women at CN for doing that in all kinds of circumstances. So, yeah, Dan, thanks again for joining me, and thanks for being on the Voice of Retail.
Well, thank you, Michael, and you made a really good point there. During these times, we really do need to thank all of the men and women, whether they're driving a truck or a train, or a frontline, grocery store worker, or nurses, doctors. I mean, everybody. We have to thank all of them as we deal with this tough time. So, a great point there, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating and review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe and have a great week.